Shalom, Apostle Tahar coming back at you with this truth, giving all praises to Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua B'Shem Bakar Kodash. I'm going to make this kind of quick unless the Spirit jump on me. And this is a sort of an introduction. And I'm going to entitle this video, The Secular History and the Bible. And like I said, this is just, I'm not really in the spirit, but I was going through this today. Earlier I was in the spirit, but I wasn't at my computer. I was going through matching secular history with the Bible, as the title is. I was going into Antiochus Epiphanes, and we know the story of Antiochus Epiphanes and what he did and how he died. And I went into the history, the secular history, and they break down the way he died and what actually happened. He died of a flesh-eating bacteria, which is among us today. You have cases even today where you have people that are eaten alive by a bacteria. You have, bacterias out there. I call them bad bacterias as opposed to good bacterias, biotics. You have, when they want to get rid of your bad bacteria, they use steroids and antibiotics. So you have bad biotics and you have good biotics. And a lot of these biotics or bacteria that they try to kill can't be killed. They're, resistant to any pharmaceutical. What they're saying now is, and that's Esau's fault, because what Esau does is you have to let nature take its course. If somebody gets sick, you let them take their course. If they have a strong immune system, your immune system, which means in service, which the Most High gave to us, fights that bad bacteria. So Esau got into the habit of giving you antibiotics and or steroids, because it happened to me. And it messes up your microbiome and your flora. Look that up. Well, anyway, that's how Antiochus Epiphanes died. It was a bacteria on the inside. It was a flesh-eating bacteria that ate him from the inside out. And we all get pains like that. I was getting some pains like that in my stomach. I wake up in the morning, but I put some concoctions together. I'm like a mad scientist, with trying to put things together, dealing with greens and chia seeds and walnuts and chlorophyll and berries, and all these different things. As the Minister of Wellness refers to it as G-bombs, which makes sense. I'm gonna get into the story. G-bombs as an acronym, G meaning greens. What is it? Greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds. I think I covered all of them. So you have the acronym G-bombs. And there's no meat involved, but we meat. We have to eat meat. On the Passover, you have to eat meat. But he pushes don't eat meat. And the stuff that we're eating is poison any goddamn way. But so let me just read this. Like I said, I'm gonna make this short, and this is sort of in the introduction. I'm really not in the spirit right now. I was in the spirit earlier. You know, timing is everything. If I was in front of my computer, I was at somebody else's house, so I wasn't set up to do it. So it says here, as Alexander the Great mentioned in the Bible, not only is Alexander the Great is mentioned in the Bible, but when we go into these scriptures and we do a thing called hermeneutics, which basically means to interpret, the scriptures. But mainly what it goes into, hermeneutics is mainly going into root words, key words, the etymology of words. So we call it breaking down the scriptures, breaking down the prophecies. So we go into these different prophecies, the prophecies that took place in the past and the prophecies that are about to take place. You might say, oh, the Hebrew Israelites, they go open up the Bible and they'll read a prophecy and they'll just make it up. Well, guess what? Lately, I've been going into I would take a precept and I would go to Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever, any search engine, mainly Google. DuckDuckGo and Google is about the same. They made a big deal about DuckDuckGo. It's the same information, same goddamn information. So I would go to Google and I would put in a precept that's something prophetical, something from the prophecies or one of the prophecies. And I would put the precept, book, chapter, and verse, and then I would put behind it commentary, and it would lead me to a bunch of sites. Normally I'll click on Bible Hub, but there's others. And then you have maybe 5, 6, 7 interpreters, which are top so-called biblical experts, scholars, historians. And I normally go to the Cambridge Bible for Schools and Colleges. And like I said in the past, they're either hit or miss. Sometimes they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Sometimes their commentary might be 2 lines long. Sometimes there's no commentary there. And sometimes there's a whole lot of commentary. So they're confident into the fact that they have the answer. So what I do is I'll say, well, let me see what the commentary says. So I go to the commentary and I'll say, wow, they're on point. So when people say that we're making stuff up, these, like I said, lately I've been going to the commentary pages and they say the same thing, showing you that we're not making this up, that it's common knowledge among scholars. So now I said, let me play with, you're going to be amazed when you go, you might go to it and do videos on it, whatever. I went into the Antiochus Epiphany, and I didn't put is Antiochus Epiphany in the Apocrypha, it's Antiochus Epiphanies in the Bible. I just put Antiochus Epiphanies. Then it started going into the history. Then the #1 book that popped up, well, really the only book, which they call a primary source, is the Apocrypha. And they mention they mentioned the Maccabees, first Maccabees and second Maccabees. So now I was thinking, as I was coming home, I was thinking, I said, well, wait a minute, why would, like, we use Apocrypha, right? The one West is going to the Apocrypha. You have this clown, Vocab Malone, saying, now he's kind of saying he goes with it for history reasons, but it's not canon, it's not acceptable, accepted text. There's a term called, the term is Textus Receptus. Now, when you look that up, it means accepted text. Now, Vocab Malone will get on us about the King James. Well, they use the King James Bible, and that's the least accurate Bible. They'll make a big deal. If we use the NLT, make a big deal about that. You probably say you should have been using the King James. But guess what? Since he said that, what do? We go into these different what do you call it? Versions of the Bible. Just to you know, to check side by side the King James to the NLT, the King James to the ESV, the King James to the Geneva or whatever. And it's not all that much of a difference. Matter of fact, when you go to the Blue Letter, you have all those versions. So now, like I said, when I typed in Antiochus Epiphanes, I didn't put in the Bible, in the Apocrypha, religion under the category of religion or whatever. I just put in Antiochus Epiphanes, and I started reading the history. And the first source that they gave me was the Apocrypha, the first Maccabees and the second Maccabees. They didn't even mention Josephus. I didn't read all of it, but I'm pretty sure they mentioned the Josephus. You can find out a lot of information in Josephus. You can find, and I would say the Apocrypha would have to be the Maccabees, first and second Maccabees would have to be a primary source. And Antiochus Epiphanes is not a religious figure, but he's mentioning what they call a religious text, the Apocrypha. And they go into you go into the history, and coming back to what I said, I was coming home, and I was thinking, you have two major printing press that print the Apocrypha. There's the red edition, we call it the red edition, and the black edition. I had a black edition that got tore up, and I went through a couple of red editions. I'm mostly going to the web anyway. I hardly turn pages. Every once in a while, I'll turn pages, but most of the time we'll read the scriptures out of when we're on the highways and the byways. We read the scriptures out of a smartphone. It's very rare we actually open up the pages, but if I'm home, I'll go into the pages. I'll put some notes together. You know, whatever the case may be. But the two major printing presses, I don't know who else prints the Apocrypha. I'll do some research on that. Are the two most prestigious universities on the planet Earth. And I'm not talking about Yale and Harvard. The two, if somebody said, oh, my son was accepted at Yale, another person said, oh, my son was accepted at Harvard. Then you have another person, well, my son was accepted at Cambridge. Cambridge, Oxford, pretty much trumps Yale and Harvard. I mean, they're all top schools, but when you mention, if you say I have a degree, I studied at Cambridge or Oxford, they're gonna stop and listen. All right. So now these two universities, which the University or college was set up, it goes back to the scriptures. It was set up for religious studies, not for academics. It's set up for religious studies. But now they're just academic. You want to be a doctor, a lawyer, go to certain med schools, pre-med, law, whatever. But these universities are institutions of, you know, Christianity, the Bible. So, you know, I was thinking, I said, wow. I said, the two top prestigious universities on the planet Earth, one is Oxford, and they have a printing press. I don't know what other books they print, but one of them they print constantly. As I'm speaking right now, they're printing their version of the Apocrypha. And so I said, Oxford and Stanford. I mean, Oxford and Cambridge and Oxford. Who do you think they're printing those books for? Are they saying, well, we got to print these books because a lot of these Israelites, these one Westers are waking up. So we got, no. No, they're not printing it for us. They're printing it for the elite scholars and historians. If you become a historian on the ancient world, you gotta come you're gonna bump into Bible stories, man. If you're studying ancient history or you're a professor of ancient history, what part of history are you talking about? You have to know about the Levant or the Fertile Crescent. Abraham's hasn't come up because you got these guys mainly in these the Black conscious community. Basically, what they say is Israelites never existed. Well, what, you know, if that's the case, why is it that they print? And I'm pretty sure they print Bibles too, King James Version Bibles. So, like I said, they didn't print those. They didn't build a printing press for books. Mainly, the book I'm focusing on is the Apocrypha for us. They didn't have us in mind. It was for top Edomite historians, whether they're religious historians or whatever. Because if you're going into history, you're going into the beginning of civilization, you got to go back to the Fertile Crescent, point blank period. Anyway, let me just read some of this. And then you're going to know that we ain't making this up. It says, is Alexander, the Greek mentioned in the Bible? Though Alexander the Greek is not mentioned specifically in the Bible, Daniel and Zechariah both prophesy about the rise of the Macedonian Empire out of Greece. Did not Paul go up there and teach the people of Macedon? Those were Israelites, by the way. Daniel's prophecies are so direct that some scholars, not necessarily biblical scholars, but historians, scholars meaning school. You were school. You go to first year in college, and you seriously studying for a test. You're a scholar. All right, look the word up. It says, have tried to move his historic, scholars have tried to move his historical lifetime closer to Alexander to explain their accuracy. Let me read that again. Daniel's prophecy are so direct that some scholars have tried to move his historical lifetime closer to Alexander's to explain their accuracy. Daniel wrote in the 6th century BC. That's 600 years before the BC, meaning before, what is it? AD means Anno Domini, BC means before Christ. But now they use the acronym BCE. Instead of saying before Christ, they'll say the C is common, before the common era. BCE, before the common era. They usually say BC, which is before Christ. I even hate to say that word, but it just means anointed. That's all it means in the Greek and in the Hebrew. Christos. Daniel wrote in the 6th century BC, 600 years before the birth of our Lord, hundreds of years before Alexander lived, right? Because it wouldn't be a prophecy if Daniel wrote it during the lifetime of Daniel. I mean, the lifetime of Alexander. He had to write it before Alexander came on the scene. That's why they're called prophets. You feel me? Zechariah wrote between 520 and 470 BC. Alexander was born more than 100 years later in 356 BC. If you're going to speak about an individual that's going to come on the scene, and that individual comes on the scene 100 years later, guess what? That's a prophecy. If he comes on the scene 10 years later, guess what? That's a prophecy. They said Alexander lived only 32 years based upon secular history and based upon the prophecies of the scriptures. But in that time, he led armies throughout the known world, from his home in Macedon, Greece, through Persia, which is Elam, the Indians, the Persians, the people of Iran. Now, I picked up this woman that was Persian, an older woman. She had to be, I don't know, 75, maybe 70. And we just started talking, right? And, I asked her where she's from. We had a good conversation. And she said she was Persian, because they used to say Iran, but really the people of Iran are really Persians, right? There's this one prime minister that asked the world, don't call us Persians, we're people of Iran. But they're actually Persians, which are Elamites. So I'm picking a brain about the ancient history, and she goes all in the ancient. They study that ancient history, man. They know about Alexander the Greek. They know that Alexander and his armies conquered them. So she knew all that history, man. So it says through Persia, Asia Minor, Egypt, all these places existed. They existed to this day. Persia exists to this day, which is Iran. Well, the whole of Persia is India. And that's even in the scriptures. They mention Elam. Somebody can put the scripture in there if they want to. I'm not going to look for it. They mention Elam, and then a few sentences later, a few verses later, they mention India. So we know that Persia, Elam, that the people of Elam, the Elamites, are actually Indians. So if you want to go all the way back, they're really not Indians. They're really not Persians. They're really Elam. And they're Shemites, by the way. Asia Minor, Egypt. Now, all these places the Apostle Paul went to. He went to Macedon. He didn't go out here. He didn't go that far out, but he went to Asia Minor. All right. And we know about Egypt. And throughout the Mediterranean Sea regions, he had no heirs, but his legacy lived on through the establishment of Hellenism. Now I got to look that up, whether he had heirs or not, because I heard reports that, but I got to look it up, that they killed his children that he had. I got to go into it, all right? The Greek, that's what's beautiful about history. You got to keep asking questions. You got to keep researching. It said the Greek culture, Greek became the official language in all his conquered areas, and that's what any conqueror does. You got to learn their religion, their ways of life, their language. And Greek culture was required or encouraged. Well, it was required when Antiochus Epiphanes came along. It wasn't required when Alexander. He allowed us to keep our laws, statutes, and commandments. In those areas and surrounding regions, for 300 years, the Greek influence reigned. In 63 BC, 63 years before the birth of our Lord, the Romans conquered Jerusalem, which is true. And that was before the Lord was born. Daniel and Zechariah's prophecies. Now back to Daniel's prophecy in Daniel 2. Daniel interprets King Nebuchadnezzar's dream, saying there would be 4 empires to rule the known world. And we always go into that. Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. History records the Babylonian King Nebuchadnezzar's current rule, right? Medo-Persian, Greek, then Roman Empire. Now they get stumped when you try to find out about the Roman Empire that's spoken in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, you go into those commentaries, they're not gonna tell you it's America. They're not gonna tell you it's NATO or the EU. Because you know why? Because they would have to say that they're part of those prophecies, man. If they were really truly honest about history and about prophecy, they would have to say that if they were truly honest, they would have to say that the Israelites are the people, the 12 tribes of Israel are the people of North, Central, and South America scattered north of a Negroid, Indian, and Latin descent, Hispanic descent, and also scattered around the world. They know this because that's all they do. They get guys that get paid good money to research. That's all they do is research, man. That's all they do is research. They go into books. They have what you call it? Think tanks. What is a think tank? Let's look up the word think tank. I don't gotta look it up. It just means to I don't gotta grab you by the hand no more. It just means a bunch of smart individuals get together on one topic and they speak on it. They bring out documentations. They'll have documents with them. Then they'll have archaeologists. They'll say, okay, we got to dig this place up. According to this prophecy, according to this book, it's located right here geographically. So they would get historians, scholars, and trained archaeologists to go and dig it up. All this stuff about you, Jake's, spewing off that history about Kemet. Where'd you think you got it from? You got it from the fucking white man. Champion, I can't say his name, is a tongue twister. And others, I have a book on that. I have an actual book where they go into these guys that dug up the all the information, all the mummies and the pyramids and the language of the Egyptians. What somebody said that is the Coptic language. The Coptic language is actually the actual Egyptian language that they spoke. We don't know. But we go into hieroglyph. But if it wasn't for Esau, you wouldn't have shit, man. You Jakes wouldn't have nothing. All these guys, and they're good at what they do. All them guys with Sarnetta and them, they good at what they do. They can, any of them guys, Shaka Amos, Jabari, Reggie, I mentioned all of them. Any of those guys can go into any university on the planet Earth and they can lead the so-called black studies class, because that's all they do is study, right? The same thing with Esau does. But Esau gets paid. He gets paid. He gets paid handsomely. Your job is to come into the office, do research, hop on a plane with a trained archaeologist to dig up stuff. How do you think they knew about the Ark of the Covenant? Not the Ark of the Covenant, because they haven't found that. That's hidden. I'm talking about the Ark, the Noah's Ark. Well, they read the scriptures and they knew it was in Mount Ararat. Then they went over there to get receipts on it, and they did. They said, "Yep, there's an actual wood made out of gopher wood, and the dimensions fit the dimensions that's in the scriptures, that's found mentioned in the scriptures." Because Esau is not a spiritual man. Esau is a man of logic. He'll pick up a book, an ancient book, right? He'll study it. He'll find out if there's any of the descendants of those people, see if there's any remnant of the language, and he'll learn it. And he'll go down there and he'll find the truth. So he knows about the history of the ancient, the Ur, the Chaldees. He knows where so-called civilization started, was in Ur, the Chaldees. So when you mention Abraham as a religious figure in the Bible, you have to mention Abraham as an individual that walked the earth years ago. So he can also be mentioned in in history books. It said the Medo-Persian Empire overtook the Babylonian Empire in 539 BC. That's also in the scripture. Daniel the prophet of the tribe of Judah received a vision of the Medo-Persian Empire's destruction. The Most High names the Medo-Persian and Greek Empire in Daniel 8, verse 20 to 21. Okay, this is the ESV, the English Standard Version. Let me see if it's going to cover. Okay, good. It covers both verses. It says Daniel 8, 20 to 21. As for the ram that you saw with the two horns, these are the kings of Media and Persia. And that's what it says in the scriptures. And they know through secular history that there's a people called people of Media and the Persians. The woman that I gave a ride to, that I picked up as a passenger, when she mentioned Persian, boy, we went in. We went in. And she went into the ancient. They teach their children about ancient Persia. And the goat and the goat is the king of Greece. Now it says in the King James, the king of Greca, which means Greece. And the great horn between his eye is the first king. Now, if you read in the King James, it sounds pretty much the same. Only thing is missing are the D's and the thous. That's the only thing that's missing. Okay, so it says, chapter 10. I'll just read a little bit of it. This is Daniel 10, verse 20. Then he said, do you know why I have come to you? But now I will return to fight against the prince of Persia. And when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece will come. 21st verse. But I will tell you what is inscribed in the book of truth. There is none who contends by my side. Now, you know what I got to do? I got to go to the King James, all right? To see what that word Greece is. Okay, it says Greece right here. Let me see what it says right there. So that's, bear with me for a minute. Bear with me for a minute. Okay, let me do this. Daniel 10. And verse 20. Okay, it says Grecia or Greca, Grecia. It said, then said he, 20th verse, knowest thou wherefore I come unto thee? And now will I return to fight with the prince of Persia. You got to read the first verse to get the understand what he's talking about. And when I am gone forth, lo, the prince of Grecia shall come. Guess what? This was during the time of the prince of Persia, the king of Persia, the Persian and Mede Empire. But this was a number of years before the king of Grecia came along. But I will show thee that which is noted in the scriptures of truth. The scriptures of truth is the scriptures. And there is none that holdeth with me in these things but Michael your prince. And Michael is right beside the Lord. He's number one out of the four archangels. See, now this is getting long. I didn't want it to get long, but yeah, you know what? Shit happens. And this is why we don't get into debates, because you got to do a lot of studying, man. And you ain't doing the work. So we read up until this point, okay, in chapter 8, a ram with 2 horns represents the Medes and the Persians. The Greeks are represented by the goat with 1 horn and 1 king, Alexander, which came from the west. Yep, that direction he came from the west. The goat kills the 2-horned ram, but its single horn is broken off because he got sick and he died at 32. He started conquering at the age of 20. He conquered for 12 years. And he got sick and died because the Most High wanted him out the picture, because that was a fulfillment of that part of the prophecy. The same thing with John the Baptist. John the Baptist, he got killed pretty quickly in the New Testament because his job was to be the opener for the Lord. His job was to cast out the stumbling block, but he did that when he was Abba. And you can say it was John too. So reincarnation is definitely biblical. Horn broken off at his greatest time. Alexander, of course, died young at the height of his power. The goat's horn is replaced with 4 horns. Daniel prophesies that the great a kingdom would be broken into 4 parts. Also, Daniel 11:4. This is precisely what happened to Alexander's kingdom. Daniel 11:4. And as soon as he was arisen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided, because he died, he got sick and died, incurable disease, toward the 4 winds of heaven, north, south, east, and west, but not for his posterity. No, because those 4 wasn't his children. They came up with him, because the king passed his kingdom down to his children. Nor according to the authority with which he ruled, because the kingdom was split into 4 parts. For his kingdom shall be plucked up and go to others besides these. And that's Cassandra, Lassamasis, Seleucid, and Ptolemy. See, they don't teach you this in these churches, man. This is precisely what happened to Alexander's kingdom. We read a little bit more. I'll read like 1 paragraph more. The Most High used Daniel to tell the future about Alexander the Great. He also told Daniel that the Israelites, these guys be saying, well, Israelites never existed. Well, wait a minute. Why is Israel always mentioned in history? When I typed in Antiochus Epiphanes and I read throughout his history, they mentioned him taking over the Israelites. There's fictitious people that don't exist. They said the Most High used Daniel to tell the future about Alexander the Greek. He also told Daniel that the Israelites, which are his people, will return to the promised land, which happened during the time of Nehemiah and Ezra. And that was during the time of what? The Medo-Persian rule. Zechariah tells in chapter 9, so I got to read that, and beyond, the path Alexander would take through Syria. He prophesies that Alexander would not harm Jerusalem, right? Because he kissed the Jews' asses, man. Because he saw the high priest and the priest that accompanied him dressed in white. That's in the Josephus. He had a dream. He had a dream that he saw the priest. Then he saw the priest. He bowed down to the priest. And then it was that priest, I forget his name, I did a video on it and I mentioned his name. I went deep into Alexander, and I proved that through studies, I proved that Alexander was schooled. His primary teacher was not Socrates, Aristotle, and he spoke fluent and spoke fluent Hebrew and wrote and spoke Hebrew perfectly. And he kissed the ass of the Jews. He didn't tax them. And there was this priest, I forget his name, that showed him where he was mentioned in the scriptures. He said, "Yeah, that's Daniel's talking about you. That's you." And it bugged him out. So he paid a lot of respect to the Israelites. And it was Antiochus, when he came along, he came against them. That's why he died by that flesh-eating disease that the Most High plagued him with. It says Jerusalem in history tells us that Alexander recalled a dream as he marched to Jerusalem. Well, that's it. He stopped his army and went with I didn't know they were going to, this was going to be, I was going to read this. It said he had a dream before he saw the priests to the temple to offer gifts. He treated the Jews with kindness. Yeah, because he met that high priest. And I believe part of his name was, Judah was in his name, if I'm not mistaken. While Alexander the Great is not mentioned in the Bible, well, it is mentioned, it's mentioned in the Apocrypha. They mention Alexander, but they referred to him as the Greek, or the rough goat, or the leopard in Daniel 7. It is clear that the Most High gave visions of the future to his prophets. And this also proves to you that when the Most High gives visions, he can give visions to other nations. He did give a vision to Alexander that included the influence of Alexander the Great. Earthly kingdoms come to power and are overtaken, but it is the Most High who holds the future in his hands, and his word stands. So anyway, that's it. With that, I'm gonna say shalom.